This city doesn't even look like Mogadishu. Not even close. Come on, Hollywood, not all Africa looks the same. Welcome to History Legends, and today we'll be reacting to the helicopter scenes in the movie Black Hawk Down. It's a spectacular movie, but let's compare it to what actually happened. This movie takes place in Somalia in October 1993. An American task force of 160 Rangers and Delta operators was dispatched to capture two insurgent Somali commanders. And this intervention is what we'll see right now. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out my brand new Patreon. Check out my book with tons of veteran stories. You can also get t-shirts like the one I'm wearing. All the links in the description box. Alright, so I got my coffee. Oh yeah, before we start, this is one of my favorite movies ever, but every critic I make is only for you to understand what actually happened. Okay, quick pause. You see these vehicles? They're called technicals in military term. Kid, that part is perhaps one of the biggest inaccuracies in the movie. You see these big buff African militiamen, super angry, ready to fight. The problem is, in 1993, Somalia had just gotten out of a famine. This is the reason why the UN went to Somalia in the first place, to provide food aid. Somalis were so malnourished that Americans called them the skinnies, so they should look more like the Somali pirates in Captain Phillips. And second thing, the African actors do not look Somali or East African at all. Now, since the movie was filmed in Morocco, I suppose they hired West Africans. And after a quick Google search, I found the answer. The guy playing the buff angry commander is called Razak Adoti, a British actor of Nigerian descent, West African. It might not be a big deal for some, but of course, Black Hawk Down couldn't tell the American audience that their elite troops fought against skinny guys that were like 90 pounds. And the other thing you can notice is if I backtrack a bit, you see all these vehicles and cars that are burning. Okay, I don't recall seeing pictures of Mogadishu with just plain chaos. Like, people were living there. There were like food markets in this area. There was a residential area. So they try to make it really African chaotic. I think they put all the stereotypes in this movie. Oh my god. This RPG scene is very famous, but the crazy thing is that we have a direct witness of this event. And that's something the book covers, but the movie just erased it. That's the story of an 18-year-old called Aden. Amidst the chaos of the battle, he ran home. And on his way, he saw a Somali militiaman, one militiaman armed with an RPG, step into an alley and drop to one knee. The militiaman waited until the helicopter had passed overhead. Then he leaned the RPG up and fired at the aircraft from behind. So it's pretty similar to what we can see here, but it was a lone militiaman that took the opportunity to fire. It was not a huge group of militiamen that intended to destroy the helicopter. And what most people don't know is that a Black Hawk helicopter was already shot down a week before the events of this movie. This gave a great sense of confidence to local militias. But it also makes us question as to why American helicopters flew so low when they knew that 1 week before one of the helicopters was shot the same way. Oh my god. It's always a tragedy when something like this happens because a Sikorsky Black Hawk costs about what, $10 million? and an RPG rocket is about $250 and can be manned by anyone. Doesn't require much training. But as you can see, urban warfare is a nightmare for helicopters. You see, usually helicopters fly too high to be actually threatened. But we've seen in countless special forces operations how the moment they fly low, they become increasingly vulnerable. Now, RPGs are not really the main threat because you have to be incredibly lucky to hit your target. However, a simple heavy machine gun can wreck you a helo. Even sustained fire from Kalashnikovs can cause massive damage. Not only can the pilot get killed, but the tails and the blades, the most fragile parts of the helicopter, can also be damaged. Not only that, but when the helicopter flies down to either drop some troops or pick them up, they need a lot of space. Otherwise, the blades can easily get caught and damaged in electric lines, trees, and like we see in this movie, the moment the tail gets hit, there's no going back. The bird drops.
6-1 is hit. He is hit. Walkout's bird is hit.
Also notice here, they had a drone, I think, or a plane that was recording everything that was happening in real time. So that was something new for the time period, that the commander can see everything live. And in this case, he can see the disaster happening right there.
Hit.
I wouldn't be in his position. It's a horrible feeling. But the pilot, very good. We can see he's an elite one. He's avoiding the crash. This scene for me is tragic and beautiful at the same time. Because this is what actually happened. You see, when Super 6-1 was dropping, look at the faces of the troops on the ground. They're completely shocked. They're already pinned down. And the guys that were supposed to rescue them are now getting shot and destroyed. Everyone knew that something had gone horribly wrong. And the movie accurately portrays this despair. Now, before we jump in, I think it's important to mention that yes, the American troops on the ground were pinned down. They were fighting against the odds. But that's the American perspective. The Somalis had a completely different perspective of this battle. The locals literally perceived these American soldiers like gods. They see these super tall white men coming down from the sky, well fed. They're wearing a shit ton of body armor, and they have helmets with goggles. You might be used to this vision, but for locals, they could not see anything human in this man. The Somalis were not just scared, they were utterly frightened. But the movie shifts this perspective by making the Americans look like the ones that are vulnerable. Honestly, we see that these guys are elite because the helicopter could have crashed in a way that kills the entire crew, but the pilot here managed to salvage most of the helicopter and avoided the death of everyone inside. But no, this city doesn't even look like Mogadishu. Not even close. Come on, Hollywood, not all Africa looks the same. Now, if we look at Rabat, Morocco, we clearly recognize the city from Black Hawk Down, and they simply added a sandy filter. If we look at footage from Super 6-1, there are very few buildings with multiple floors. Most of the city was made of huts or one-floored tin buildings, with a lot of trees along narrow streets. And this is where the helicopter crashed. It did not crash in a beautiful plaza surrounded by tall buildings, but in a shanty town. And honestly, it makes landing such a Black Hawk even more impressive. Right here, there's so much space. I mean, it's impressive, but okay. Imagine landing on houses. Like, you literally have no space to maneuver. And it makes me mad because knowing the actual setting of the city, you understand how the initial American convoy got lost. They were literally driving through a giant maze with very little distinctive landmarks to guide themselves. And for me, this is important because it shifts the entire dynamic of the movie. And the other thing is that when you see these guys here just chilling, you see? Okay, these guys. What are they doing there? They're just chilling. It doesn't even make sense. These cities, like, they're already destroyed and everything. They really want to show the chaos, I understand, but the helicopter crashed again in a residential area. You see a lot of kids, a lot of women, a lot of people living there and actually curious as to what just happened to their neighborhood. Whereas in the movie, you see a shit ton of men just running around. It's literally chaos. I mean, if the movie wanted to portray a hell situation, it's well done. But again, that's not how it actually was.
We got a Black Hawk down. We got a Black Hawk down. Super 6-1 is down. We got a bird down in the city.
Get an MH6 on site, check for survivors. Send in the SAR bird. I want ground forces to move and secure new perimeter around.
Yeah, but I can't imagine what it must have felt like for these commanders. It was just a simple routine mission, capture these guys, take them back, and that's it. So they just lost a helicopter and now they have to fix this mistake by sending another one to replace it in the formation.
Take Walcott's position. Roger. 6-4 is inbound.
The goal here is for the two helicopters to get into position for them to provide mutual support. This is an important detail because the helicopter is the most vulnerable during this maneuver. But overall, helicopter tactics haven't changed much since the Vietnam War. In general, a helicopter can avoid enemy fire by traveling low and fast, so the enemy can only see you for a second as you zip by. Or you can avoid it by flying above the altitude where enemy weapons could reach you. I couldn't find a proper report, but I do believe that Super 6-4 was flying at a low altitude. But it was also flying at a slow speed to get into position. Again, mobs of militiamen hunting down the helicopters. Oh my god, they didn't even aim. Oh my, literally have aimbot turned on. That's cheating. But jokes aside, why did this happen? How did the helicopter become such a target? The good thing for this video is that the pilot survived this entire battle and he explained it himself what happened. Basically, the helicopter crew cannot hear enemy gunfire because of the noise of the engine and the rotors. To this day, a helicopter is only aware of being targeted when bullets cling on the chopper. Even when the helicopter crew becomes aware it is under fire, they still might never visually locate a single one of the persons firing at them. And this is the problem Super 6-4 faced. The worst is that it was armed with a minigun that could fire 4,000 rounds a minute and take down any threat within seconds. But since they were flying hundreds of yards up, they couldn't distinguish militiamen from American soldiers or civilians, so they ended up not firing a single round. And this is where I believe they were at a higher altitude, then they flew lower, and this is when they got hit. But correct me if I'm wrong. But after knowing all this about helicopters and their crews, I'm much more appreciative of the work they're doing. Honestly, it's one of the toughest jobs, and I can't even imagine what helicopter pilots in the military have to go through. Usually in movies, you see them flying low like it's nothing, picking up troops and leaving, but it's much more complicated and much more dangerous in reality.
You sure you look
understand the pedals, but we're good.
All right, put it down on the airfield, Super 6-4. Have it checked out just to be safe.
And thing is, today it's still the same way. The moment a helicopter gets damaged, any type of damage, it has to go back to base. In real life, unless the helicopter is hovering and the distance is within 200 meters, the RPG will miss. So while the helicopter is moving, it is virtually impossible for an unguided rocket to hit. But if it hits, Black Hawk Down portrays this with extreme realism. And the other thing I like, despite the fact that they were not... The other thing I like is that you see the militiamen, I mean, they're not aiming, so that's bad. But the good thing is that you have multiple rockets being fired up, and you have one that hits, but you have the second one that misses. And that's actually more often than not what happens.
I'm getting a lot of movement in these pedals. Check the pistons again.
It's a flying coffin at this point. Ooh. Like I told you before, the pilot Mike Durant survived this event, and this is what he had to say about it. I quote, "I was flying the helicopter and it felt like a speed bump. Like when you're going too fast in the parking lot. It hit the tail just below the tail rotor, and it blew the gearbox apart. The tail rotor didn't leave the aircraft immediately, but it decided to go pretty quickly, and when it did, we started to spin violently." Oh yeah. Just like the first helicopter, in reality it crashed into a bunch of flimsy tin huts, not in the middle of massive multi-floor stone buildings. And since this was a residential area, it goes to show how close enemy militiamen would be from the crash site. And it would be a nightmare because you would have these militiamen running around you. You can't see them, you hear them around you. There's walls and stuff. You can't hear them. And it goes to show what type of nightmare scenario this was for the helicopter crews. Because unlike the movie, it's not people from above that are shooting at you. You can hear them, but you can't see them. They're running around you. They're super close. They're a few meters away. Then they pop their head, they shoot at you, and they disappear. So it must have been like, the best way I can describe it is as if you're fighting in the middle of a maze.
Get the streakers calling back up, and they need to get to the rear spare set fast. I want them out of here. All of them.
In my opinion, Black Hawk Down had to explain to the American public how the elite of the US military got nearly annihilated by third world militiamen, but how they're still heroes. And rightfully, despite a poorly planned operation and a serious lack of intelligence gathering, the Rangers and Delta operators held their ground. They purposely made the city more intimidating with huge buildings, a chaotic setting, and like I said, with big buff, angry African militiamen. All this to make this entire place look like hell. So the Americans, although elite and better equipped, suddenly become the underdogs. In a way, I think that Black Hawk Down also made special forces popular, and this inspired a lot of movies that follow the same pattern. There's Zero Dark 30, The Lone Survivor, American Sniper, 13 Hours, 12 Strong, and obviously a ton of video games. But that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what you thought of my analysis in the comment section below.